You went and saw Ninja Turtles?
Twice.
No.
Yeah, it was so good, man.
Eh, I saw it with the wife. I fell asleep on it.
What? How could even just the animation itself should have kept you awake?
No, the animation was great. The animation was amazing. I love the new world of animation. But I've been a Ninja Turtles fan since I was 9, and I was extremely disappointed. Okay, why was the Ninja Turtle so good?
Well, do you want my answer? Why the Ninja Turtles is so good? Or
Yeah.
yeah, uh,
Wait. There's two other.
the
There's
new
two other
one or
answers.
the world? Just a second, the world or the new one? Which are you asking about? The world of the Ninja Turtles?
Well, I love the world of the Ninja
Yeah,
Turtles.
me too. It's
Oh,
one
I
of my
love it. It's
favorites.
awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. But the new one strayed heavily from that world to me.
Oh, totally. It was a whole new origin story. It was a completely different origin story.
But it's not the Ninja
Uh,
Turtles of my youth.
yes, I could. Definitely is. I mean, but it's like Spider-Man, where
What?
you get a bunch of
No.
different origin stories. I mean,
Well,
that's what we do now. That I'm not saying it's right. I'm
I
saying that
hate
you.
this world.
this is a, but this is a breakdown like what we were talking about last time, where the assumption is everything's going to fit together, and so so
uh,
consistency is valued. People don't value consistency anymore, so you have to
well, how did
know
you
that.
love the new Ninja Turtles and see it twice if you know that's the
Okay, so because they make up for it. One, you've got they some of the things
oh,
that they did keep consistent that were really important
there were
is that
turtles.
there were
There was a
turtles
rat.
that still have the personalities of the four humors, right? So you've still got that.
Uh-huh.
You've got that kind of medieval four personality uh mixture that always works really well. You've got the
Mhm.
strong father, right? You have this incredibly strong father uh, that is the reason that you can have uh, teenagers with that kind of power, and it's okay, right? Because normally, if you say, "Hey, we're going to give immense power to teenagers," it's a story of things going all wrong, right? You get Shazam. Where you give him the power and it's like, oh, and he barely holds it together. And but you get you have these four Ninja Turtles with incredible power, but because they had Splinter as a father, because they had an incredibly strong father who really taught them self-control and discipline and all of that, it's a blessing to the world to have incredibly strong teenagers. So that, and they kept all of that. I think that's the heart of the story, is um, the really, really strong, powerful teenagers that
Okay.
are a blessing because they have an even stronger and more powerful and loving and disciplined father.
All right. So let's just stop right there. That's really good because I think I agree with you with everything except for one thing.
Did you fall asleep so you don't get to say anything because
A few things woke me up. I'm gonna go back and watch
okay.
it because I fell asleep. So I woke back up and watched some of it, but it was. But so yes, you're right about the strong father
Yeah.
part. You're
And
right.
I thought that they were going to flip it because it seemed like at the beginning they were making fun of him when he was like, they're going to milk you. And I was like, oh, they're ruining the
No.
best
They
thing
kept
about
that.
the Ninja Turtles. But then they kept it. They kept it so well. And I was like, that
They
was that was beautiful. The way they
that
kept it.
I think Mitchell's versus Machine it had a lot of that element of storytelling where
Mhm.
Dad's right, um, um, and so he wins because he sees that this is the
Yeah.
reality of it. There
He,
was
he,
one thing,
he, he wins because he has the wisdom.
right,
He has the
to
vision.
see
Yeah.
that's what their end goal is. But here's part that I didn't like that really to me let it put a stinker all over Splinter was that Splinter heard his own voice in the bad guy, where Dad was like, "Oh," and the bad guy expected Splinter to understand him, right? And Splinter was hearing the black bad guy talking, is like, "Oh, that's how I sound," and I was
Yeah.
like, "But Splinter,
Yeah. but the diff so Splinter had a character arc, and he usually doesn't. That is true. Usually you meet Splinter at the end after he has learned everything,
And then he
but
makes a wise wisdom
yeah,
choice.
but they gave him a character arc, but it wasn't a wisdom character arc. It was a fear character arc, right? So he didn't have to learn new wisdom. He had the wisdom already, but what he had to let go of was the fear that and man, I'm raising teenagers right now. That's exactly I think Seth Rogen must be raising teenagers right now.
I don't doubt that part. I agree with that, but that's not the character.
Do you
Don't you voodoo me with a question? I know what you're doing. You're trying to think of the right question to put me in a trap. Yeah, you were.
So I just but wisdom is something that is continually growing, though.
That's not what I'm talking about, Jason. I'm talking about Splinter. You keep on doing this.
And here's the other thing. We always meet Splinter over against Shredder. And so this is the pre-Shredder Splinter.
Okay, so this is my this is
in the next one, I think it will get the character that you're looking for.
See, that's the thing. That's the only reason I think I have a little grace for this version of the Ninja Turtles, because the virtues of the Ninja Turtles weren't all there, right? They weren't matured. It was very early. Oh, when they took off the mask and it fell down inside the tunnel, the sewer, I was so mad. I was so mad, dude. I was so mad. Okay, so I'll get to that in just a second. But if they are trying to say this is the beginning, the origin story of the Ninja Turtles, the preface to who they become later, because most of the time when we see the Ninja Turtles growing up, even the cartoons, they're actually young adults, not teenagers. Right. Like their whole characters are developed and mature, but they're posing as teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Or this is what I was thinking about. Or the earlier generations of teenagers were far more mature than we actually are today, so that the teenagers of yesteryear were what we consider young adults now. Because I remember watching Ninja Turtles when I was like 9. We're talking 1988, 89.
Well, I remember the first time I remember when they put out the pilot.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
Blew my mind. And I was like, I'm in forever. I mean, like
you had me at hello.
They put out the pilot, and then as a test, and then they didn't keep it going because it was just a test.
Yeah,
I
remember that.
Asking everybody, "Did you see it? Oh my gosh, did you see it? Is there more? Does anybody know?" Like the buzz around it was ridiculous.
Because it just popped up on television. It just popped up on television. It was just like your normal Saturday morning cartoons, and this one interrupted everything for me. That's how I saw it. And I was like, what is this? Because it wasn't like trailers. Oh, this is coming. It wasn't trailer. It just stuff just popped up, you know? So I saw that and I was like, okay, the only way that I can accept the Ninja Turtles now, the way that they're doing it, is that this is the beginning of the maturity of infant Ninja Turtles, teenage Ninja Turtles, right? So they're the beginning of the teenage years. And then maybe when I actually come into their life, they're probably like 19.
18, 19, yeah.
Yeah.
This is freshman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
This is 13.
And we're used to 17, 18, 19-year-old.
That's the only way I can reconcile this film.
But think about it, right? We watch one of them enter puberty. He says, "Oh my gosh, all of his hormones hit at once." Right? The first time they notice, that's a 13-year-old. So,
but that's the other thing. April, what did they do to April? Come on, man. Like when me and Sharon were in the theater, we were watching, and as soon as he's like Leonardo, all the spoilers are in here. So Leonardo jumps up and says, "We have to go get this bike for this beautiful woman," you know, and it was like, wait a second, that's Michelangelo. Michelangelo's a guy who falls in love with April and his like head over heels with her. You know,
that's what that was my memory too. But then I was like, was I wrong? Were they all in love with her? No, it was Michelangelo. Yeah.
In the movie, they all kind of fell in love with April, but in the cartoon it was Michelangelo, and then in the movie they did kind of level off, and it was really Mikey who kept on going after her, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
he ended up hating Casey Jones. Is like, man, she's mine,
yeah.
you know. Um,
I
and
can't
so
wait for Casey Jones.
yeah, I think they previewed him here, but and so when I saw that, and then so me and Sharon just gasped so loud in the theater, and everybody started laughing. He was like, because they said she was beautiful, and we just started dying laughing, like, ah, that girl ain't beautiful, that girl ugly, you
But
know.
I mean, you know what Solomon says. There's
Oh, here you go, you, Jason, just say
he,
it was bad.
no, man. There's six things, yea, seven that are too high for me. The way of a serpent on the way of a lizard on the rock, the way of a I'm not gonna remember them all. The three things, yea, four that are too high for me. The way of a lizard on a rock, the way of a bird in the air, something else, and the way of a man with a maid.
Yeah,
There's just something mysterious, right? You meet a girl, and somebody just says, "Oh my gosh, she's the one," and um, everybody else is like, "Her? She's the one, really?" And um, turns back on his best friend if he speaks wrong about her. What's that? Um, is that My Girl? The song My Girl?
Jason.
I thought that part I thought was realistic because they are backed off, they're in the shadows, they're trying to hide everything, they're not no risks, and then he sees a girl and he's like, okay, I'm done with this risk-free life. Let's do this. It's right. It's a girl that finally gives him the courage to charge in, and he drags all of his brothers into it because of their loyalty.
Their first fight, I
Their
like that. It
first
was
fight,
great.
yeah.
I thought
Their
that
first
was.
their first fight is to defend a woman. Um,
Yep.
yeah. So there were a lot of really good things
I don't.
about it.
There's a lot of good things about all kinds of stuff, but
But the
the characters matter, their virtues
yeah, no,
matter, and so like when I see them acting outside of their character, it's like it muddies the virtue of the individual. The virtues are all there, but it's
yeah. You mean
their character.
are you talking about the how much they changed April? Is that what you mean?
Oh, I'm not just April, but I think they were trying, I feel, to show how each Ninja Turtle came into their own character.
Yeah, this is the one step back,
Right.
before we normally meet them, because they're fully formed ninjas by the time we normally meet them, and they're still learning. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
I can get with that. But knowing the arc and knowing where they're trying to go, it doesn't give me any hope that they will get where they're trying to go when they've already messed up the beginning of the characters at this stage. If they're going to say we're going to have a trajectory, they're off course. Right. And all the elements of the story, I think, were really good. Like even Sharon, she didn't know what to expect, but she came in, she was like, it's okay. I walked away. I was so disappointed because I have an affinity for the characters growing
yeah,
up. Like I know them. Like there's lines that I repeat from them, and to see that those things, those elements, I'm looking like, well, no, he should say this should say that I couldn't even pay attention to. And some of the pieces that were really good pieces, like they're defending a woman. If April is supposed to be beautiful, we're fresh out of luck. Right. And
so
this is what made me so mad is like they made her black. Okay, I can get with that. Just as like Little Mermaid too. So she's black, but it's like scraps. It's like, you know what I mean? Like this is the scraps.
yes.
It's like, well, make her a beautiful black woman. This girl is weirdly shaped.
Okay, so this was Malachi's take on that. He said,
give me that wisdom, Malachi.
He's 13. He said he was like, it was weird the way they shaped all of the people. Right. And he said, at first I thought they were trying to do it from the mutants' perspective so that the mutants were were normal, and so how
Uh-huh.
would a mutant would see a person as abnormally shaped? He said, but if that's what they were doing, as the turtles came to understand and connect with the humans, they should have become the regular shape by the end. He said, if they would have slowly made them into a regular shape, then I would have bought it. He said, but I think that the character design of the humans was didn't work. And I think he's right.
Oh wow, that's a really
Oddly
good.
shaped faces, and I think but I also think he's right that it is some sort of, hey, from the mutants' perspective, we would look odd, right? So trying to do something like that, I think that he's right that that's what they were trying to do.
Well, and they had the
And
moment
he's
too. They had
Mhm,
the moment to change that when Splinter is down there hurt, and the humans reach out to help him. That would have been a great change to see them.
exactly. Yeah. So um, Malachi was like, that's how I would have fixed that.
Wow,
And
that's good thinking.
this is always, but this is one of the things that Aaron and I have always done, is it's okay to criticize a movie or a story, um, but you don't get to hold on to it unless you can explain how you would fix it. Like,
Mm,
how would you fix the story so that it told the truth, and that way it's a way, so that way they know, oh, I can criticize, but I have to also say
mm.
this is what would make it better. So then my criticism is a way of gaining wisdom, or trying to at least hunt for wisdom. And so it's always fun leaving a theater with my kids, because they're always like, okay, here is what I loved. Here's the thing that really bothered me. Here's what they should have done. This is how they ruined it. They could have done this and that wouldn't have ruined it.
That's really good, man. I actually like that a lot. Have you okay, we're gonna probably get to Barbie because I gotta talk to you about that. Yeah, talk
Did you
about
see
Barbie.
it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I can't bring myself to. I know I need to watch it because I um I don't know. I feel like, look, people don't know how to work through stories anymore or what's really going
Mhm.
on. And I think some of our storytelling nowadays, because we can only see with one lens, I think everybody sees everything with a lens of critical theory. And so we
Yes.
only see very surface issues of narrative and storytelling. And so we're not able to see that the people are actually hiding truths inside of their narrative that aren't obvious to us. We just take the most obvious thing and
Right.
say, ah. So I watched a show with my daughter called um What's Your Name? Or Your Name. I think that's what it's
Okay. I
called.
haven't seen this one.
It's a 2016 Japanese anime. And at first, so it was 2016. The first thing I thought that was going on. So a boy and a girl switch bodies.
Okay.
You have to see it. You have to. It's a wonderful film. It sounds trans at first. It's not. But there's a few parts in the anime. It's not really kids anime because there's a few parts in the anime where the boy turns to the girl and he's like, "Whoa, breast. Yeah, what are these?"
Yeah.
And oh, I don't have a penis anymore. What is this? And so there's a moments in the beginning where you're like, okay, and we're skipping. Um, and but there's a reality to the question of, like, if you actually did switch a body as a teenager, you'd be like, what is this? Like, this is surprising here. So I get that, but they switch bodies, but it's um Freaky Friday. Remember Freaky Friday, where
Oh yeah.
it's kind of Freaky Friday, but with boy and a girl, and
Okay.
then time travel at the same time.
Okay.
And I don't want to spoil it for you because I really want you to see it. If it's like $3.99 on, it's one of the best films you'll watch all year. I
Okay.
guarantee it. Just the sheer storytelling, because I walked in not knowing anything about the film. My daughter loves the soundtrack, and so she's been listening to the soundtrack in Japanese. When she heard it
Yeah.
in English, she was like, ugh. Uh, and yet the way that they told the story, they set up everything so well from the beginning, the first third of the film, and then the problem. Um, they made heartache and pain beautiful. You know
Okay.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you didn't expect it and it still hurts, but you're like, wow, this is beautiful. This is and boy, nobody wants to experience this. They made the connection. There's a longing in you for a resolve. It's been a long time since a film is like, and especially anime from 2016. So it was kind of before all the trans woke stuff. So then I know that's not what they're trying to do.
Right, right.
They're trying to tell a story, and the story of love, and it was well done. And
Yeah.
I think Your Name, yeah, Your Name is the name of the film.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I was.
God has given the Japanese in the last 50 years, 60 years, an incredible storytelling acumen. I mean, they have led the way. Their samurai movies basically taught us how to make westerns. Their cartoons have been at the forefront, and our cartoonists have been copying them since at least the 60s. So I don't know what I suspect that it's going to be the way in for the gospel, right? Is that we're going to be able that the church is finally going to wake up and say, oh, storytelling, this is the Japanese people they've been able to hold on to the world held together by spirit, in a way that almost no moderns have in their storytelling. And I think it's going to be the way in. Unfortunately, the Japanese population has been going down now for a number of decades.
I think they're going to lose it in the next generation. They've left enough of a trademark that I think hopefully somebody will pick it up. But I don't think it's going to stay in Japan. I don't think they're going to have the children to be able to do it.
Right. No,
to the next
yeah, I
generation.
think so.
I think
I
it's
mean,
going to be for those.
unless real revival sweeps through and they start
Yeah.
having kids.
Yeah, but that'll
so,
still be 80 years from now.
Hopeless. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a very hopeless culture right now.
Okay, I'm going to give you a very, very hard task in this next piece, okay? You're going to have to take Barbie, because I'm going to get everybody mad at you. I just know this is going to get everyone mad at you. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm just going to ask all the questions. But you're going to take Barbie and wrap it into chapter 4, The Image of Evil.
Okay.
And so you're going to segue those two together. I just can't wait to see what you do with this. But should people go see Barbie?
Oh, they absolutely should go see it.
And that's good. Thanks. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. And I mean, I think so.
Really?
And not an immoral. I mean, if you don't want to go see it, don't go see it. I'm not in a like bind your conscience sort of way, but there's this cultural conversation going on that I think you just miss out on if you're not paying attention to the things like this that are kind of mass media. It'd be like if if you didn't go see Star Wars. In terms of number of people that are going to see it, percentage of people going to see it right now, it's about the same as when Star Wars came out. And you don't have any. If you want to be friends with your neighbors, sometimes you gotta be a part of the normal culture.
Jason, what do you do when your neighbors are jumping off of bridges? Would you go jump off a bridge too?
Depends on how deep the water is. I mean, no, but there's nothing in it. I think I think Christians have been afraid for a long time. And I think they've been afraid because they're not sure if we really have answers or not for the cultural questions, the cultural conversation, because we've been in retreat mode, and because we haven't believed that the gospel transforms culture. So we have avoided culture as a way and condemned it as a way of saying, we don't have to transform it. We don't have to be a part of the cultural conversation. We don't have to be a part of the neighborhood. But if you look throughout the history of the church, they actually had they actually made a empire-wide decree that Christians were no longer allowed to be the literary and poetry professors in schools because they had so effectively reoriented the literary conversation around the Bible. Because Christians just said, "Hey, I'll take the let's take the literature posts. Let's take the and you saw the same thing. Man, the Ben, I can't remember his last name, but he's a Jewish comedian, and he did a movie about all of the Christians that were fired out of science departments.
Mm. Oh, you're
Do you
talking
remember
about
this?
Ben, yeah, yeah, he was from Dry Eyes, Clear
Yeah,
Eye.
yeah.
What was
He was
his name?
Bueller,
Yeah.
that guy. He's funny. And it was a brilliant movie. All he did was go out and interview people about surrounding different people that got fired for their Christian faith um, in science departments. Well, the similar sort of thing actually happened in under Julius, not Julius Caesar. Oh, it's the other Caesar that starts with a J. Um, he's known to history as the apostate, but basically Christians were not allowed to teach um, literature anymore because the conversation around storytelling had been so effectively um, had been so effectively converted to a conversation around Jesus. You couldn't people would talk about Odysseus um, having to, if he's going to gain wisdom, he has to go underground to the place of the dead, and then he comes out with a clearer vision of what his home's supposed to be like, and said, which you think, oh, so it's like a death and resurrection, right? Exactly, it's like a death and resurrection that Odysseus has to go through, because now Odysseus is being called the Christ figure, and he's like, well, we can't have that, right? We can't have the cultural conversation around storytelling be co-opted to the use of Christians, and so they just fired all the Christians. So uh, we have, but the last 100 years, maybe we've been in retreat from the cultural conversation because I don't think we believe we have answers the way that earlier Christians thought everything could be used to help, and everything human was going to reflect the image of God, because even when we sin, um, Schaefer used to call this the mannishness of man. Even when we sin in an imago Dei way, right? Even when we flee God the way an imago Dei would, right? So he says, um, there's nothing to be afraid of, because charging forward with wisdom, we actually have the answers that they're looking for to the questions that they have. So that there are things to avoid that we're told clearly to avoid. So like, you're not going to say, hey, I'm going to go in and take this strip club for Jesus,
Mm.
by hanging out in there enough. um I think there are things like that you would say, no, that would be a foolish way to try and take over, even if it's the right attitude. Like, oh, what would it look like to take the coffee industry for Jesus? What would it look like to um start a cigar lounge, and show the world what God made tobacco for? Whatever industry you're in, how do I use where God has put me as a way of furthering the kingdom, is a different way of thinking. When the Christians in Acts were kicked out of Jerusalem, it says they went forth gossiping the good news everywhere they went. Right? They couldn't stop talking about it. You've met people like that are like,
Yeah.
they have news. I remember once I worked at a factory, and this this full-grown adult human male comes in one morning, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, did everybody hear?" Right to the whole factory, and everybody stops, thinking like, "Oh no, what happened?" And he said, "Mary Kate Olsen from them Olsen twins, cocaine. She's in jail for cocaine." And I was like, what? "That is none of my business. That's the weirdest." First off, you're a full-grown adult male. What are you even talking about, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen? Second off, that's none of my business. It's called a gossip magazine for a reason. And third off, a poor girl, that obviously childhood fame wasn't good for her. But what are we doing talking about this with a bunch of dudes in a factory? Um, you meet people like that they just can't help but talk about certain things. Well, the early Christians, you know, when the first missionaries got to some of the islands, you know, around the official missionaries, they found people that were already Christians because of the traders, because of the people that would go up, you know, to sell goods and buy goods, that were Christians that couldn't help but talk about Jesus everywhere they went. So the gospel has always spread as through the official mission work of the church and the uh, business people as well.
Mm.
So and through the army too. You know, you get you get Christians that are sent around the world by the imperial army that can't help but convert people everywhere they go. So um, the so I think when we look at something like Barbie, we have an opportunity to be a part of the cultural conversation if we go see it, and if we learn how to enter into conversation with our neighbors. And this is one of the things that I think that's the other reason that we don't. I mean, I know there were times I didn't watch something because I wanted plausible deniability. It's like, I don't want to have that conversation because I'm not ready for it. And so I'm not going to watch it, or because it's a distraction or whatever. So I'm not going to watch it because I'd rather talk about something else. But I think with something like Barbie, what just hit what, $1 billion in the box office. I mean, that means your neighbors have seen it. Even the dudes that are pretending they haven't, they've all.
Except for this one.
No, I know there's a few here and there, um, but like I said, you know, you're well within your Christian freedom to say, "Ah, nah, it's not my thing. I'm not going to go see it." But
Why? Okay,
you're outside the conversation.
so I have two questions. One is, what is the conversation, the cultural conversation that Barbie's trying to have? And then um it was off the go ahead. Why don't you answer that one first, and I'll try and remember my second one.
I think it's about whether or not feminism delivered on its promises. The promises that feminism gave to little girls, whether or not it ever delivered on those promises. Am I, am I
When
allowed to give spoilers?
we already have with Ninja Turtles.
Okay.
So I don't know. We're not saving
Yeah, that's
Barbie.
true.
We're not
Yeah.
saving Barbie, bro. No, all the spoilers are coming out. All we do is we should change the show to spoilers.
Spoilers. Yes. Yeah. So it starts off with that exact question, right? It says all of the little girls used to play wherever you find girls, you will always find dolls. Little girls play with dolls. They used to play with baby dolls until Barbie came along and gave them a different vision for their lives. And it shows all these little girls smashing up their baby dolls and switching to Barbies.
So
Right?
there's a transfer from motherhood to
A transfer from motherhood as the ideal that we are teaching children to what is it that Barbie promised? And that's the question. What is it that Barbie promised? And then immediately you switch to Barbie say you go over to Barbie, who is saying, "Look, I can have it all. I am beautiful, lovely, have all these friends, and I can be whatever I want to be. I can." Feminism has made everything equal, right? And it's the whole thing is told, so it's from the perspective of like a little girl playing with dolls. So how does a little girl playing with Barbie think that about the future because she's playing with Barbie. And they show that Barbie is inherently a feminist promise, right? Barbie inherently is a feminist promise that says um, that if you want satisfaction, you get it through your career, right? You get it through being wanted by boys and through your career. That's where the satisfaction is going to be. And they're really clear that that is the way Barbie, that is what Barbie promised to little girls. And so when Barbie ends up leaving Barbie Land, right, the toy version of, and discovers what the real world is like, um, that it's uh, and that it's not really like that, right? That the promise is not true. She has to decide if she ends up basically being put in the dilemma of, do I have the power to change the world into what I want it to be, or do I have to submit to reality and become different myself, um, and find where the real fulfillment is.
So you have feminism and postmodernism all wrapped into one.
All wrapped into one. And then the question is, and this is why, like, it's so, there's this really funny moment early on where Ken comes and he says, "Hey, can I stay the night?" And she says, "Why?" And he says, "I to do what boyfriend and girlfriends do." So what's that? And he's like, "I don't know." Right? Because it's the perspective of a little girl who really doesn't know yet, right? She's playing with the dolls. It's similar to what they did with the Lego movie, right? Where there's a person playing with the Legos that you can't see telling the story. There's a little girl playing with the dolls, and she says, "Well, no, because tonight I'm going to hang out with my friends and and do our choreographed dance." We just went a little. It's like a little girl's dream for what she thinks adulthood is like. We're going to grow up and we're going to do choreographed dances every night at sleepovers, and it's a really funny way into um, a, a little girl's psyche, and what dolls like Barbie cause her to think adulthood is going to be like.
So it's like
Right?
it's trying to re-examine the myths of the imagination that tell them about the world. They're
Right,
re-examining it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they're examining, what story does Barbie tell our girls that gives that fills their imagination with expectations. And I think we should be asking those questions. I mean, my girls didn't do Barbie because Barbie, I thought, was inherently feminist. Right? Yeah, we don't do Barbie.
Well, it was. I mean, that's its
Right,
origin
yeah.
story.
And then but they actually dig into the origin story, and Barbie meets the creator of Barbie. And the creator of Barbie says, "Look, I made Barbie for my daughter because my daughter was everything to me." And so Barbie then goes back to Barbie Land now with this inherent um, contradiction in the actual creation of Barbie, that Barbie was a mother who found all of her satisfaction in a daughter, telling her daughter to not have kids so she could find satisfaction. And that messes with Barbie's head. And so
So,
she goes,
so
so
Barbie's creator was
Barbie
a mother.
was a mother who found satisfaction in her daughter, telling her daughter to not have
The
children so she could
feminist
find satisfaction, right? So a mother giving feminism to her daughter
was poison.
because yes. So it's this so there's this inherent contradiction so then she goes back to Barbie Land with this inherent contradiction, that actually the satisfaction is in motherhood, and a mother is but a mother promised something other than satisfaction in motherhood because she loved her daughter so much, right? That's so it's broken, right? So feminism is fundamentally self-contradictory. That's what the story argues for. So she goes home, back to Barbie Land, and then has to wrestle through it. And there's a lot of funny. It's a very funny movie. I mean, the people laughed a lot throughout, um, and um, and I think it has its problems, but that's actually completely right. Right. So she ends once she learns about motherhood, she can't be satisfied with feminism anymore. And so she ends up having to choose. Um, and there's also, a mother-daughter character that come with her, and that the the mother is it, the mother is dissatisfied, um, because the promises of Barbie are not are not playing out in her life. And so she's got a daughter, and she's struggling with it because she loves her daughter so much, but she's fighting with her daughter, and she's got this deeply embedded promise of that Barbie that playing with Barbies developed within her, that the stories she told about her future are not coming true. And Barbie is wrapped up in that. And so she comes back too. And so then they're all wrestling with it, until Barbie decides to go back to the real world because she wants to go have children. And so she just, she basically has to leave Barbie land to find real satisfaction in being a mother.
Now, are they, go ahead.
And I because of the opening scene and the closing scene, I think they absolutely know that they're saying that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Do they know what they're doing? But I think that, okay, so there's a couple things here I want to challenge. One of them is that it seems like, from what you're telling me, that there is a war within feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, completely.
And the ones
and I think the trans stuff has revealed it.
Right.
It's revealed the crack in the foundation, and now they're wrestling with it because you've got all these feminists that are what do you call it now, transphobic. I know there's another word for it, but that they always use, but that's
I don't even know. Anti-trans.
They're anti-trans, but there's a and it's
oh yeah, that's right. There is because Dave Chappelle was talking about it.
Yeah, that's so that, and then following the J.K. Rowling thing. J.K. Rowling is a feminist, or calls herself a feminist, and then and she's like, but a man putting on a dress doesn't make him into a woman. TERFs. Yeah. So it's revealed that there is a crack within feminism that is so there's a certain kind of feminist that is happy to be used by the Progressive Party, because really it's a power grab. And if a powerful enough man comes along and tells them things, then they're like, let's do it. We're feminists. Yay. And then there's another kind of feminist that is that really, I think, is actually trying to that believes that there's a fundamental rivalry between men and women, that rivalry is fundamental, identity level fundamental. And so they see the trans movement as just another way that men try and invade female spaces and take them away.
So oh man, there's so much here. Okay, I'm just keep writing down questions. So the feminist movement is fighting against the transgender movement, but there's the generation that grew up. So you got Barbie, 1959, March 5th or something like that, I think is released. 1959, the original Barbie comes out. Yeah. So then you have the grandchildren of the feminist movement who are saying this didn't work.
Yeah, this didn't deliver.
It didn't deliver on what you said.
It promised a lot, and it didn't deliver.
It didn't deliver. And so, but now they're also not going back to. So this is a couple different. Oh, this is so crazy. Let me see if I can get this out. It's going to take me a minute. You have people currently thinking that the argument that this group is making is like arguing against the heterosexual movement, the traditional family movement, because they're going to kind of against the Barbie thing. But they're actually saying, no, feminism didn't deliver to us what we wanted. And we're a generation past that now. And we need to try something else other than the original feminist movement. Now, it might be more radical feminism, fifth, sixth wave, whatever we're on now,
Right.
but they're not going back to traditional values. So they
Right.
want to blow that whole thing up. And they're actually mixing, it seems like, from what some of the stuff I read, that they're mixing the traditional values and the feminist movement all together in one pot. And they're trying to
Yeah.
blow that whole thing up. Right.
So, and this is so my biggest, my biggest, what would you call it, criticism of Barbie is that there are no dads.
Yeah. Right. That's what I was
Right.
going. That's where I was going to.
Yeah, and so I think that's actually that's actually the conversation that I think needs to happen. And I think if you're aware and you're ready to have it, and it's going to be a huge opportunity, because everybody I've said that to, I was like, hey, I was like, oh man, Barbie movie was super funny. I really appreciated it a lot. I loved the stuff about women being made to have kids and how they find satisfaction in being moms, and everybody's nodding along. I haven't met a single person that was like, oh yeah, nah. Everybody nods along. And then I say, and then when I say, but there were no dads, everybody goes, oh, you're right, there were no dads. And I said, that means that they haven't yet found an answer. Right? They haven't yet found an answer. They're asking. I think they're asking a question that's legit. They're pointing out contradictions that are true, and they're saying something else that is true, that that being a mom is a wonderful, wonderful thing, right? And that it's a very satisfying thing for a woman to become a mom and have children and love children and raise children. That's all good, but there's no dads. So how's it gonna? You're still missing literally 50% of the equation.
If you follow their worldview, men are nothing more than sperm banks.
Yeah, I mean,
Right. Like,
I just saw a I was reading through the recent movies that have been announced, in the trades, and there's one that just got greenlit. Now I don't know what's going to happen because of
the strike.
the strikes and stuff, but it's it's like two friends who want to pick their own sperm donor, but so they are that's what the movie's about, is they don't want a dad for their kid, they want a sperm donor for their kid. And I was like, man, this is awful. That's about the worst plot line that I've ever heard.
It's reverse
So,
Dave Rubin.
it's like reverse. Yeah, exactly. Right. You got, so you think, man, this is messed up, is these two women trying to trick a guy into becoming a sperm donor.
My wife,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
what I just think, like, but that is kind of the, maybe this is going to be the new wave of feminism, is that single motherhood is
Already, it's
thing
already,
that,
it's already there.
I mean, it's there. I know it's already there, but I mean, it's not. I haven't heard anybody arguing for it. Maybe you have.
I think the government has made its largest argument for it in welfare systems. Right. It's not
Yeah,
a, go ahead.
that's just an argument, though, that the government is a better dad. And maybe
Yeah.
that's the same thing, because feminism always leads to some other authority being a tyrant, and that's what we've always seen.
Well, part of this is what happens when men don't kill serpents, but part of the feminist movement exists because of men not fathering and loving their wives, and being a good husbandman, and being a good, I mean, husbandry literally is like gardening, right?
Yeah.
And so you get men not tending the garden, and weeds grow up, serpents come in, and then you have, the government saying, well, we'll tend the garden, like we'll take care of you, and completely displace the men, some of them happily. And I think that Well, New York isn't proving it, that they've done a better job. You look at New York, it's like, well, there goes the government's kids,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like that's if you want to know how the government's kids act, just look over the last 40 years. That's government kids, and
Yeah.
that's who's raised them, and so that's what we currently have. So I don't think it's a good argument. I do want to talk about this real quick before I forget it. The move between feminists, the fighting between feminists to say you didn't deliver for us. They can feel the longing for something. They don't know what it is. They think it's children, but what it is that they need submission and they don't want to submit, right? That's part of it. I think they need to come underneath the mission, and they're feeling it, and they think the mission is their kids, right? Their
Right.
kids are submission. there's another side of that comes after the original submission. There's a second version, right, of them discipling. But now it's not just the feminists who are rising up. A lot of black people have been comfortable with the move of the transgender movement inside of the liberal progressive movement. And it's just now starting to come and fight them. So Jess Hilarious is a black comedian who got up basically and said, listen, you're not a woman. Okay. I don't care what you say. You don't bleed. You don't have times in a month. And you can't have that. And there was another trans person that was like, listen, you guys, you women aren't the carriers or aren't the protectors of cycles of the month. Like, they're not yours to protect and keep. And Jess flipped out and was like, what are you talking about? You a guy. You're a dude. You're fake. And like she's not a Christian at all.
No.
Right?
She's funny.
She's funny. She is funny. But she wasn't being funny with this one. She was just being serious. And have you seen that?
I haven't seen that clip. No, I've watched Jess Hilarious on Wild and Out, but I haven't seen. Yeah,
I was in. So I followed her ever since she was just on doing shorts and vines and stuff back in the day. And so now there's a war between black folks now and trans men, black women. And it's interesting because a lot of black men are saying, "Oh yeah, see, you went too far." And they're like, "Whoa, how y'all not going to protect us from these other dudes? Like this is fake. Like this is." And they're starting to rise up and say, "This is now y'all don't went too far. Y'all don't went too far." And it's weird that the fight is over cycles, right? It's weird that that's the thing.
It's not though. It's not weird that this is finally, I think, getting to the honest truth, because evil, there's two aspects of evil. There's the and Lewis breaks it down into the energetic and the passive, right?
Mm-hmm.
The energetic evil and passive evil. Energetic evil is when you are actively trying to get beyond your station, beyond your limitations, right? So goodness embraces limitations, that God-given limitations. God gives us limitations. We say, thank you for that. I wouldn't want to have more than what you gave me, because this is a good place to be. And so the energetic side of evil is always trying to bust ceilings that are creational ceilings. So and one of them is, and this, so and part of that was always the trying to bust the ceilings of gender, right? Gender gives us limitations. And so you see this in Macbeth, when Macbeth is trying to basically justify things, he starts to try to use magic, and he says, I need metaphysical aid, right? Because right now I'm being limited by my nature as a human. I'm being limited, and I can't seem to bust. He's trying to take the throne. He's trying to usurp the throne, but it's because what he says is, I'm not just after leaving my station as a lord and wanting to become king, right? I'm not trying to just get out of my social station. He said I actually went out of my metaphysical station. And so he
Wow.
he he says, so come, you spirits that tend on mortal thought, and unsex me here.
Mm,
Right. So the limitations of gender are viewed as um, God trying to keep me down. Whereas if I can bust past the limitations of my gender, then I can become like God, because there's no more, because I can keep climbing from station to station to station. Now that is actually, so the idea that you have a ladder of metaphysical stations is not true, right? Where like angels are at the top, and then you have demiurges and different demigods, and then you have super powerful creatures that have magical powers, and then you have men, and then you have women, and then you have slaves, and then that are different metaphysical beings up and down the ladder, and then you've got animals underneath, and you've got fish underneath that, right? That idea that you've got this ladder of being is the the earliest lie of Satan, right?
mm,
You can move up the ladder of being, and become more like, become like God. That's just not true. You can't even a woman can't even become like a man. A man
mm.
can't become like an angel. That's that's not the way that's not the way metaphysics works at all in the first place. But you've always had the desexing or the unsexing, the degendering, um, as as part of the energetic kind of evil that's trying to get beyond its station. The other things are, trying to gain perfect knowledge, trying to get. He, uh, he actually goes through the different kinds, trying to get omnipotence.
What page you on?
This is on page 64.
Okay, yeah.
This is lust for omnipotence, lust for omniscience, lust for unmediated and direct uh, knowledge. So, as a human, all of our knowledge is mediated and indirect, metaphorical. We don't have direct knowledge of the essence of things, and the evil characters in late medieval literature would often want un, unmediated knowledge, direct knowledge, because that would then be counted as control. Like knowledge is power, and what they meant is if you have knowledge of the thing directly, of its nature, if you know maybe the word that God used to create a thing, then you can actually control it and change it and have power over reality to
It's so
change it.
witchcraft, man. My goodness.
Yes, it's all witchcraft. So that's from Dr. Faustus. That's the promise of Dr. Faustus, he's trying to use witchcraft in order to gain immortality, or to gain riches and wealth and all sorts of things. Um, and the opposite of that, um, the opposite of that mentality that says I'm going to get beyond my station is a submissive thankfulness, right? Submission to God's placement of you, uh, metaphysically. This is not to say, it's not saying like, oh, if I'm born poor, I have to stay poor, because that's an economic reality. It's submission to the ontological reality of who you are as somebody made in the image of God, uh, created as the kind of creature that can have fellowship with God, but not the kind of creature that can have all knowledge, that can have direct knowledge. Even we're the kind of creature that has limitations on space, limitations in the way that we pass through time, limitations on how we know and what we can know, and limitations on our power over reality. We don't have power over reality, and so submitting to that that ontological, gratefully, and saying, Lord, thank you for the kind of creature you made me, um, including being a man or being a woman, or being a child when we're a child, or getting old. And it's so hard to continue to be thankful when your knees start to creak, and to say, oh, but we're the kind of creature that gets old, that that gets less and less powerful as we gain wisdom, right? That's God's design, and that's an important thing to embrace. And it's hard, but it's hard, right? So thankful embrace of reality is the opposite of this energetic evil that Lewis talks about, that I think is exactly the reason that you have feminism. Chauvinism, was the same sort of thing. So, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he talks about how, so he's the progenitor, he's like the mind behind the French Revolution, and the kind of the grandfather of progressivism. He says, don't teach women to read, their brains will overheat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, women are better, it's more important for them to be in the kitchen and doing laundry, and not doing things that will cause the use of their brain, because they'll overheat, and it causes all sorts of problems, right? The progressive movement was very, very chauvinistic when it started, which, mm, it's a power hungry thing, and until women could vote, they weren't included in the progressive movement at all. So it was very chauvinistic. So it's really funny, I think, when traditionalists are treated like they were the chauvinists, when really it was the progressive movement that pushed chauvinism really hard, um, the because of the Machiavellian, that embrace of the Machiavellian worldview. That is the Machiavelli is the real true great grandfather of progressivism, but he's not usually recognized that way, and usually Rousseau is. Um, but that is also an attempt at a different positioning of reality, right? It's a refusal to accept the ontological equality between men and women, with the different with the economic differences, right? So you can fall. The energetic evil can go both directions, and it's the same evil, and then we end up pitting those two evils against one another and feeling like we have to figure out how to choose which of the evils is better,
That's
rather
Barbie.
than I think that's where it ends. I don't think that's where it wants to end. It's trying to push in a particular direction, and then it ends, um, without an answer. So it just ends without an answer, right? It ends with saying, maybe women can do this thing by themselves instead of that thing by themselves, right? And so you end up with a choice between two dead ends, right? Which dead end do I want? I mean, that's not a, um I mean,
So they're still trying to
what
do the
what we
same.
want is,
They're still trying to
yes,
be the energetic evil, where they're just trying to break that nature. That's what they're still trying to do.
yeah. I think I think that we're so many generations from, without memory, that I think people actually don't know. I mean, that my you are starting to see kind of the trad wife trend, trad chad trend, uh,
Hmm.
and um,
I don't like it.
no, it's, well, one of my kids called it cosplay or something like that. I can't. They're like, but it's just like, this is. Uh, there's no substance behind it. Like, it's this. It's like a a guy putting on a dress doesn't make him a woman. Um, you know, and it's the same with dressing up in traditional garb doesn't make you a good husband wife duo. Now, hopefully, a lot they're also getting into the resources of the older world, and actually looking to try and grow into it. And but yeah, for the most part, it's just
What,
Halloween.
Jason? Why don't we? I've been going through the Bible with my children, and it's been amazing to me how much we miss in Leviticus, how much
Mhm.
we miss in Numbers, and we're in Deuteronomy right now. And one of the things that Moses, he's about to let they know they're about to go take the promised land. He's giving them the law again, right? Again. And he's giving them so much history about where they come from. And he tells this new generation to circumcise their hearts. Now, it's amazing because I feel like that we're in that same environment where we can we're trying to find the things that remind us of the old world, the traditions that we come from. And Moses is getting at them and says, yeah, here's your historical setup. Your parents failed here horribly. Don't be like those people. Remember what happened to Korah? Right? Like, don't do that. Circumcise your heart. But nobody seems to be saying circumcise your heart. We seem to be going and find the moment of error where everything felt normal. But every time I go back and look historically, it was just as screwed up and messed up. And there was no circumcision of the heart. But I think that we want the area where Christianity wasn't as tethered as it is now in society. Instead of saying, wait, how do we not go back to a least tethered, but have some sort of reformation where we redo this whole thing and bring it back to life. I know that's what they're trying to say, but like Chad is like, um, I, I'm not a fan. I know what some of them mean by it, but man, that it just seems like I haven't heard anybody really push and talk about circumcision of the heart, because all the things that they say that they want, you'll find there.
Yeah. I um I was just watching the an interview with Eminem complaining about rap these days,
Oh my goodness.
and I was like, "Oh, we're getting old."
I know. I know.
So what I don't want to do is mistake the vocabulary, which is definitely the slang of the next generation. Mistake the vocabulary um and the substance, because
Well,
I do you know what
yeah,
I
I
mean?
know.
Like,
Yeah, but
I,
you know good and well patriarchy drives you nuts.
oh, it totally does. And when somebody talks about it, I bite my tongue. I'm like, oh, and try and think and listen and say, what are they actually saying?
Yeah.
Um,
But this is the thing is
because
like
it's the same thing with nationalism.
I know,
You
but
gotta
we're
wait and
acting like
say,
the
what are
words
they
don't
actually saying?
matter.
No, that is the last thing I want to do. What I want to do though is say, um, wh- where is where is the place where the that hasn't been that, because I think what you have is these is young folks that say, give us something, and um, the church has been he has not done a good job of saying, well, we can give you something. Let's talk. Let's talk uh biblical role. Like when I did in the basement of the library at the University of California, Santa Cruz, right? Uh
I
the
remember you
most
telling me
liberal
about this.
college
Yeah.
on the West Coast. It did 8 weeks on biblical masculinity and femininity, and you couldn't, there wasn't room there wasn't space in the room for more people, right? These college kids poured in, because they're like, is it, well, I want to hear anything. Like, this is not working, right? They look around and they're like, hookup culture not working. They look around and at the body count culture, it's not working, and so they know that, and are ready to hear anything. And the church has said, well, we're quiet on these things because we don't want to lose respect, I think, is actually what it comes down to. We're not willing to fight for the souls of the next generation.
You know, it's
but
interesting.
I think you're right that it's circumcision of the heart is one of the things that we won't talk about. We'll talk about clothes, don't dress this way, don't dress this way. We'll talk about all sorts of things, but we won't talk about circumcision of the heart. We won't talk about clean the inside of the cup and let's see what happens at the outside of the cup, because it always ends up clean. That's the stuff we don't, and I think it's just faithlessness. I think we don't believe it anymore. The church doesn't believe it anymore.
Oh, did you talk about the passive evil yet? I think you talked about the energetic evil.
Yeah, talked about the energetic evil.
So the energetic evil basically is the evil that it's obviously trying to get at destroying the very metaphysical reality that we're in, so that we can have a nature outside of our own to have power.
Yeah, energetic evil is trying to exceed the limitations that God has put on humanity.
Okay.
Exceed the bounds, right? So
right.
And Lewis talks about how it actually makes for really fun bad guys. Like literary in literature,
right.
there's really, you can make really fun bad guys. People
you get Frankensteins and weird stuff.
Yep, you get weird stuff. You get you get Milton Satan, who everybody's like, he's a great character, and then God shows up and you're like, he's kind of boring in Milton's version, because he comes in and is putting things back into place, or trying to keep things in place, which I think is instead of the active and I think we could talk parallels of active good and passive goods as well, and energetic and passive goods. But the active, the energetic good or the energetic evil is always trying to, it's an imitation of good without submission to God's place.
Straight up witchcraft. Straight up witchcraft.
Yeah. So you got witchcraft. You have and a lot of the things that we don't think of as witchcraft in this understanding turn out to actually be witchcraft. And this is what the third, that hideous strength, is all about, how these things they keep calling science are actually witchcraft, because they're not even using the scientific principles anymore. The scientific principles have become energetic evils.
And part of what I mean, and I'm sure we're sharing the same definition of witchcraft with it, which is trying to accomplish the ends of God without God. Right.
Well, trying to accomplish the ends of God without God, and trying to
the blessings of God without
power
God
over reality.
Yeah, which is exactly, because if you're able to do that, then you have the power to get good, get blessing, get victory without God, which is you're higher than, so you have power to do that, which is that's witchcraft, right?
Right, but it only works in a mechanistic universe, and that's
right.
The biggest. I mean, I think he actually mentions something about that in here. On the very first page, 64 of chapter 4, the image of evil, he calls it the metaphysics of magicians.
Yeah, I see that.
Right, the metaphysics of magicians is that the world is mechanistic, and so if you know what lever to pull and what button to push, then you can get the outcome that you want.
Goodness, that's like the charismatic movement.
Unfortunately, it really is, right? It's like an attempt to be faithful in a mechanistic world, and it's not always an attempt to be faithful, but I think for a lot of Christians, that attempt to be faithful in a mechanistic world, and ends up sounding a lot like you end up prayer, it becomes incantation.
Yeah.
You and and I have and I learned some of this. I actually learned from an Assemblies of God friend of mine who saw it and hated it. He just was like, he just um he used to. I watched him just tear into a fellow charismatic for sounding like a cold call psychic.
Mm.
He was like, there's nothing you're doing that a cold call psychic couldn't do. He's like, he just tears into him. He's like, this is just, it made him so angry because it was because he was a charismatic, but didn't
Living in
believe
the
in
mechanistic world. Yeah.
yeah, who was like, you all are acting like this is a mechanistic world. And he's like, and it's not, because he understood that it wasn't. So there's a way, it's not, and this is where, those charismatics tend to sound, uh they tend to fit in really well with reformed folks, because well, the reformed with they tend to really like older reformed writers who talked about the spirit a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it that way. Whereas a lot of the newer reformed folks, they actually believe in a mechanistic universe too. They just believe in predestination and no spiritual gifts. So
Mm.
it's a much more boring version of the mechanistic universe, but they agree on the mechanistic universe. um,
So
but
then
that
this
but
passive.
I like that it's the metaphysics of magicians. Is That's a good way to talk about it, because we don't live in a mechanistic world, right? We live in a world where a personal God is actively blessing, protecting, caring for, providing for his people, or cursing when we're unfaithful, right? When we turn away from him, he curses. But the curses are all for his people, are all discipline that brings us back. Um, so it's disciplinary action, not curses. Versus for the unfaithful, it's curses. Um, Even though it can be the exact same rod, um,
Mm.
it works to a different end
Depending on
for
how it's used,
but
right?
depending on, yeah, depending. So um and I think that's why I think we need to focus instead on people's hearts getting right with the Lord. So when they come and they say, well, I'm looking for traditional values or traditional roles, or say, oh, that's great. Let's The beginning of the root of that is hearts that are right with the Lord. That's the beginning of it. um and if it flows, anything else, anything that flows out of any other stream than that is going to be poison.
So then the passive evil.
Yeah. So so instead of what he calls frenetic anguish, that's his summary of active, of energetic evil, is it all becomes frenetic anguish. He says that the opposite is, of that is images of passive evil, which are defect and disease.
Mm.
And so so he says this over against most of the writers of his time. Spencer doesn't use images of uh, active evil or of energetic evil. He uses images of evil as a passive thing, because he thought that was actually more of a danger in his day, for Christians, because he's writing allegory that's trying to help Christians understand how to live well in the world that as God made it. And so he said, for Christians, the we're less tempted to become energetically evil. We're more tempted to become passively evil.
Mm.
Um, and so he uses images of evil that have to do with defect and disease. That So when you needed to cut out the disease, you didn't, and so it grows, right? So the the so each of the seven deadly sins are confronted, but they're each confronted as a different disease that that you're refusing to cure, right? So it grows, so the when a fever, if
This is
when you
James.
this is James, yeah. So he's saying, you let sin in, um, or you invite sin in, but it comes in like a disease, and it starts, it seems small, like, oh, I can handle, a little speck on my shoulder, it's not a big deal, but then it turns out to be cancer that metastasizes underneath. So that's the image of each of the seven deadly sins that he uses, that they're each a different kind of disease that seems small at first, but is deadly, right? That um, that kills you, right? So that's the first thing that evil does, is it's a small disease that grows to kill you. Um, and then the second image that he uses is the image of false rest. So that rest at the wrong time. That he says this is a major temptation for Christians, that we and the reason it's a temptation is because we are looking for rest, but there's a time to rest and there's a time, in this case, to fight, because he's dealing with knights. And so as they go along, one of the temptations that they all have to face is the invitation to sit down and rest when it's time to fight. You're chasing a monster, and you see uh, a pool, a nymph by a pool, that says, sit here and rest with me for a while, right? And she's beautiful, the water's delicious, but you're on a mission, right? You're chasing a monster, and so you have to complete that mission. And so but the knights are tempted by these pools of false rest, and so that if you stop and you drink from it, then you get the sleep, that sets in, and so you become useless. You no longer fight, because you stopped to rest too soon,
David and
right? So it's
Bathsheba.
exactly, so instead of killing the dragon and then resting, you stop to rest in the chase, and you never kill the dragon, right? So he says that's the other image of evil as false rest. And then the last one, and this is my favorite one, is the image of evil as a waste house.
Mm.
And this is something that you used to run into in fantasy um, regularly, where you get to a house that obviously used to be full of wealth, but now is empty. But the wealth is all still there. So you've got
Mm.
gold everywhere. So you go into a cave and you've got gold everywhere, but then it's covered in spider webs. Or you go into an old house and it's beautifully decorated, and there's marble, and there's all this amazing um, decoration, and expensive, elaborate uh, decorative money that invested into it, and then but it's empty now, right? So it's a waste house where wealth has become waste because there's nobody using it or enjoying it, or uh, it, um, there's nobody living in it anymore. So you've got a lot of gold, but it's unused, unspent, unenjoyed, ungifted, right? So when gold is doing what it's supposed to, it's decorating somebody. You're giving it to somebody. You're spending it on somebody. Um, it's being used. Uh, as soon as you take all of the gold, let's say you make a bunch of gold dishes and gold platters, and then you put it into a cupboard, and then you forget it's there. That is actually something that's evil, because that's not what gold is. It's a misuse, when it's by hoarding. A misuse. So
Mm.
um, you are becoming the dragon, or and then everyone dies, and so now you've got this hoard that's completely unused. And he says this is one of the images of the kind of evil that Christians, at the end of Christians get involved in a society, they're very transformative throughout history, um, and wealth does build up, because of the wisdom that God's people bring to a situation, and they build up a bunch of wealth. But at the end of that cycle, one of the temptations is then to hoard the wealth rather than to use it for what you're supposed to use it for gifting and for spending, and for all of the things that wealth is good for. Wealth is really a it, when it's viewed properly, it's the power to love people. Money is the power to love people. Um, and if you don't use it and you hoard it, then you're saying, I'm not going to use it to love people. I'm going to keep it to myself. Well, that actually ends up gutting a society, right? So that image of a house that's full of things that should have been somebody's inheritance, but instead never got passed along, is one of the great societal evils. He's trying to put a picture to one of the great societal evils that he sees in his day, where there you don't have the inheritance being properly passed along, and so it's being wasted. So that waste house, he says, is the when evil is kind of released into society, or when evil is embraced. Instead of getting the temptation is not, I'm going to try and become a wizard, right? The temptation is, I'm just going to hold back. I'm just going to hold this
Mm.
back for myself and never gift it to anyone, never use it, never spend it, and
This is
keep it
interesting.
safe.
There are a lot of people talking about the national debt. There's a lot of people talking about how the supply chain dry up, stuff like that. And out of all the people talking, there's only two folks that's challenged that. We just recently had George Gilder on the show, and he's one of them. David Bonson is the only other person I've ever heard talk like this. I think he's even pulling it from Gilder. But George Gilder said, "Listen, the problem isn't even the the debt or taxes." He's like, the problem at the end of the day is that people aren't producing, people aren't creating, and people aren't seeking to love their neighbor by creating something better for them than they currently have right now. And so the creation supply side of things is what's the problem. And it's like, and so if people were creating and loving their neighbors through making their lives better or being a blessing to them, that has a restorative effect on an economic culture, on a wealthy culture. But when you stop producing, and then the only things that stay in cycle of what you had in the past, that stuff gets eaten up, and people hoard it, and become more restrictive of laws. They just start clamping down, and so then you start losing that, instead of how can I be a blessing or a gift to people. And man, not only have I've been thinking about this. It's not only inside of the world of economics, but it's also in just everything. So you look at we have Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all these other social media, TikTok, whatever you name them. I don't care how bad you think they are. They are places that we get to create wealth that we don't take advantage of. We don't even use properly, and instead we hoard it and complain about everything that's there. And
Yeah,
it's just, and it's so, as you're saying that, all I can see is, man, there's a whole lot of complaining and not a whole lot of working going on.
right. Well, yeah, we don't we're risk averse. As conservatives especially are incredibly risk averse. We don't look at it and say, oh man, I need to bless people, I need to do this, I need to do that. We think, i've got to I've got to protect what's mine. um and I mean, I even think this is, you see this in the Second Amendment rhetoric, you see this in the financial investment rhetoric, you see this in the buy gold rhetoric, protect what's yours. And the it's 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 a waste house mentality, but I think it is also a mechanistic view of the world. right? That says, um, I've got to that doesn't think that the Spirit of God is guiding and directing all of this place, and that His blessing is the most valuable thing. Because I think we believe the world is a waste house, um, and so we imitate it. We don't have the um, we don't look at it like a the symphony, the cathedral, the that the Spirit of God is conducting, or the Spirit of God is building.
And isn't it kind of a schizophrenic reality though? Because
For Christians, I think it is
it's
a
kind of,
schizophrenic reality. Yeah,
we're a little schizophrenic in it because we don't actually believe that.
Mm-mm.
But we act like it in some ways. And what I'm thinking about is when COVID came, watching John MacArthur's church stand up was like, that one caught me off guard.
Right.
Like, and then they come out with a movie called The Essential Church, and I'm like, now, mind you, he does all this. It's amazing. If you listen to the sermon that he preaches, like we lose down here. You ever heard that one where you say we lose down here? I think I showed you.
I've heard
showed
about it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
sent me the clip. I didn't listen to the whole sermon.
Oh, you have to. You have to. It is the mass. I haven't seen a more schizophrenic sermon in my whole life, because he takes the first 20 minutes of before he starts preaching and shows all the victories of the church in the fight against COVID. I mean, he's like, God helped us here. We won here. We won here. They tried to take this away from us. The police stood with us here. I mean, he just goes off and listen. Everybody's a praising God. They were almost like a charismatic church. It was so loud in there. It was rumbling with joy and praise and victory in the audience. I mean, they were clapping. It was
he tapped it down.
And then they come and the sermon is, we lose down here. We don't win down here. And it was like, I've never seen such a schizophrenic. And so when I see moments like that, I'm thinking exactly what you're thinking. Here's his wealth. And in one sense, it's being gathered up because they made a whole film, The Essential Church, to tell people that the kingdom of God that's here on earth is being victorious. And the message of God is spreading to let everybody know he's the real king. And you don't get to tell what to do down here. Bottom line, he does. Yeah. And you need to submit to him. There isn't a more millennial film than this one, right? They've never, and it's made by dispensationalists, right? I don't think anybody has made a more post-mill film than The Essential Church. And yet we lose down here. It's just this weird schizophrenic reality. And in one sense, it's holding up still. It's still got pillars of evangelicalism running through it that's holding up Christendom in America, and at the same time saying, yeah, we're not supposed to be doing that. It's so weird.
That is really weird.
When I look at it, they should have never made the film The Essential Church if they believe their eschatological reality. Those two things don't go together.
But they're trying to be guided by the scriptures. And I think this is what Reformation looks like.
I think so too. I think you're right.
That you learn something new, you say, amen, charge. And then you say, oh, wait, we're being inconsistent, because you bump into stuff. You go, oh, we're being inconsistent here and there. And so I think this is and I think, I'm sure everybody's pointing out the inconsistency.
No.
I imagine.
No. I've not heard it anywhere. No.
Okay. No. Everybody's just like, hey, this is a great documentary.
Let me say, oh yeah, nobody's pointing out the film is, I will say that I think Nate and those guys over at Canon pointed out, they did a show on We Do Win Down Here. Like, that's what the cross was. What do you think the cross was? God puts on flesh, becomes a man, defeats Satan on earth at the cross, raised from the dead on earth, from the grave, and ascended into heaven from earth, and said, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go make disciples and tell them and transform and teach them to obey everything I commanded you." We win down here. We won down here. It's already
Yeah.
victory. Like, it's not like, oh, we will win. No, we've already have. That's past tense. We won down here in Christ, and Christ is in the process of transforming the whole world. And we're just in the beginning of it, right? And so they did a good job talking about that, but I haven't heard anybody talk about the film is a massive contradiction, and praise God for it, right? Like, that's like
Yeah.
it is, and I love it. I love it so much. I love that they changed their mind on COVID. I love that they are pushing forward. I love that John MacArthur's even saying before the film. I heard him talking at one showing saying, "I want to make sure that other people feel guilty for closing their doors." I'm like,
Yeah.
my guy, that's my guy, you know.
Right.
And yet, the only way that is a reality is if it's not mechanistic, right?
Right. If we look at it and we say this is the spirit, we look at the end of the day, we say thank you for the work of the Spirit of God within us to be able to stand. Thank you for the work of the Spirit of God, um, giving us this victory, that victory, that the active presence of the Holy Spirit is that's the primary blessing. All other blessings are um, it's like, we've got a sundae and they're like, oh, and we're going to put whipped cream on it, and we're going to
Right.
put a cherry on it, right? But we've already got the sundae because we have this. The Holy Spirit is actively present with us, guiding and directing and giving us himself, right? So God himself is the um the reward, I guess. I mean, it's not a reward that we earned, it's a gift, but that's the heart of it. And so we want that relationship to be good and solid, and the blessings all flow from that, and everything else is just a benefit on top of it. um, but it's their real blessings that are personal gifts. They're they're not mechanistically given. It's not
Mm.
just God set the world up in a certain way. Do this, this will happen. God is with us. Francis Schaeffer said he is there and he is not silent. Right? He is present with us, and he is continually speaking, and he is continually uh, present in a non-mechanistic way. I mean, this comes down to, it goes down. This is why you see all the weird, goofy stuff that people do in their liturgies right now, is because they don't believe that God has promised to show up on a Sunday morning by the power of the Spirit, be present, be active, be speaking. Right? Uh, if we know God is going to show up and be speaking, we're not going to put on silly outfits and do skits to hope, to try and get people to, try and work people up, or we're not going to try and do a musical number that gets people all excited, or in the I don't know, that I saw that Easter clip. I think you sent me the Easter clip when you said, like, what the heck is going on? And it was like they did a bunch of like pop songs
Yeah.
in a yeah
In a
you don't
montage, worship
montage
service.
of pop in the middle of the worship service to get people riled up. Like, you don't do that if you expect the God who created the world by his word to show up and talk again. Right?
Mm.
Um, if because that becomes the heart of it. The heart of everything becomes God is going to speak and God is going to feed us, right? And so he's going to be here, so we're going to sing his praises, we're going to pray to him because he's here with us listening. But if hey, if I show up here, the God who created me, he's going to speak a word of forgiveness over me. He's going to give me guidance and direction for my life, tell me who I am and what I'm here for. He is going to feed me, and then he is going to personally speak a blessing over me through his through his um the voice box that he's put here on earth through his minister. He's going to speak a blessing over me that will then define the rest of my week. If you believe that, you're not trying anything manipulative at all, because you don't need to. The God who created you by his word is going to come. He's coming over here. He's going to recreate you by his word. Right? There isn't better than that. There isn't something that is better than that. So you're not going to try and outdo God if you believe that that's the kind of world we live in, where God has set up the rhythms of the world. He says, just count to 7 and come here every 7th day.
Hey, speaking of, go ahead. I've go ahead.
You just gather, every 7th day, gather right here, and I'll meet you, and I'll speak to you again. And it's that kind of world is not mechanistic; it's personal. And I think that's where that's the reason that we do so many goofy things. Is we're trying to we have that we have that
we bought into the mythos of
the metaphysics. We believe in the metaphysics of magicians, and so we think we got to do something special instead of a regular church.
It's funny. That was I remember being a charismatic. It was weird for me to watch other denominations pray, and they prayed so matter-of-factly, like they were talking to a friend. And I'm not saying that they were being irreverent. I'm saying that they would say, Lord, we come to you right now in the name of Jesus. We ask that you heal John, and we hope that you would also take care of his family, provide for him, and give him all the blessings he need. In Jesus' name, amen. And I'd be like, boy, you ain't even prayed. Like, what was that? Like, you got to, and Lord, I want you to come down right now. We need you to put your hand in John's heart. Start that thing to beat. I mean, and if you ain't praying with that kind of urgency and fervency, you ain't prayed as far as we were concerned. We were like, all right, that's nice and all, but I'm gonna need somebody to really pray for me because I'm about to die. And so I need somebody who is going to going to get the ear of the Lord and have him. If I don't feel it, you ain't prayed. But there is, in that thinking, was a mechanistic type of magician that was trying to manipulate, in one sense, as if something I did or something I can do can move the heart of God instead of what he has done and what he will do. And so the justification and sanctification, him and his sovereignty would operate versus my ability to get his attention. Right now, I'm not clowning on fervent prayer. I think that there is absolutely, I believe in fervent prayer, but the way that we thought about it was a way that we were manipulating, or not manipulating. We were somehow having an effect in our own ability, like a magician, to get God to move for us, instead of understanding the relationship between the two, and then coming to God boldly to ask him like a friend or a brother, right? And it was a difference in thinking about that.
There's an older doctrine called unction.
That
we don't even we literally don't even have the word in our vocabulary anymore.
Not anymore. The old folks used to say it all the time.
Yeah, and it is the when prayer is walking in the Spirit. That's how I like to describe it. Right, when the Spirit of God is both the source and the deliverer of our prayers, right? So when the Spirit of God works within us to pray the prayers, to have the desires, to pray the prayers that he then takes and delivers by Christ to the ear of the Father, and that so that the unction, and it's the same with preaching. So the unction is the Spirit's the Spirit's work on the transformation of our desires, or the directing of our desires, so that when somebody says, when a preacher says, this is the passage I'm going to preach on, that is the work of the Spirit
Yeah, we used to say he's under the unction of the Spirit right
So under
there.
the unction of the Spirit, right? So and you can, and because of the understanding of the world as personally directed, including my own life, and that you can then resist the unction of the Spirit. Um, that, so if you say, "Oh man, if I preach on this, I'm going to lose the respectability of
Oh,
the fellows at the university." Um, so we avoid, so the Spirit pushes us in a direction and we say no, right? You can resist the unction of the Spirit by because of sin. But then when somebody gets up into the pulpit and preaches and it hits, you know, you know, the my one of my sons recently was like, "Man, that sermon made me feel so bad about myself. It was so good."
yeah,
That
yeah.
that like that conviction that we feel, that we know is directing us towards life, where you say, "Oh yeah, you're right. I've been leaning towards death in that part of my life. I want to, it helps me lean towards life." We can say thank you to the pastor. um, Thanks for your work preaching that sermon. And thank you to the Spirit, because the Spirit is working within the pastor. Thank you for that sermon. That was just what I needed. And there, you don't have the wills. It's in a mechanistic world. You say, well, whose will was it? Because you can't have the coexistence of wills. Um, and
That's
you,
interesting. You don't get the
whereas,
overlapping of covenants either in that world either. You don't have
right,
anything that overlaps. It's
you
all
can't, because it's a power based system. So you can't have the overlapping of wills, the overlapping of covenants, the overlapping of intentions.
dude,
Right?
that's where you get
God,
Arminianism. That's where Arminianism lives, right? Because
yeah, yeah. So
hmm,
this is why, um, when somebody says, "Well, I'm an Arminian, not a Calvinist," I always just ask, "Okay, well, do you have to say thank you for everything about your salvation?" And if they say yes, then I'm like, it's fine. I don't care if you're Arminian,
yeah,
because
yeah. I
you're
don't
really
care
a
how you
Calvinist.
define. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Well, eh,
we're on the same page. If you have to say thank you to the Spirit for everything, including your own conversion and the work of the evangelist, and if you have to say thank you for everything, then we're dealing in the same cosmos.
yeah,
I'm fine. If
I,
they say,
yeah,
well, no, I mean, there's part that I did, and I say,
right.
okay, we're not dealing in the same cosmos, and that's the real issue. We're is not you know not the
A
cherry
doctrinal
picking of
necessarily.
verses.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Right, right. It's yeah, it's really interesting. I've been working through that. We have a cosmological issue, not necessarily that we see the verses so different. You just live in a completely mechanistic cosmology. And so I
yeah,
can fight with you. What I need to do is restructure even like your Genesis 1 areas, right? Like
right.
who's kind of
Because I've met
who's
Calvinists that don't want to say thank you for all of it either, because it was election. Where I'm saved by election,
so if I
not
say
by
thank you, God just made me say thank you.
right. Yeah. So you're like, okay, well, we're not dealing in the same cosmos either. So it's
Or were you thankful?
so yeah, so there are some of the places where some of my the places where ministry that my wife and I were doing was really effective in people's lives. We were joined together with folks that were Arminians by self definition, but they were more convinced that it had to be the work of Christ to save somebody than anybody had ever met. Right? So you're like, yeah, you can call yourself whatever you want. You and I are dealing in the exact same cosmos, where the ongoing presence of the Spirit of God is what makes us effective to serve the Lord, and what transforms the world around us, or restores the world around us to God's intention. So
Sorry, I'm distracting you. I thought I cut my ear. I'm like, I think I cut my ear, bleeding. Um, did you get everything that you wanted out of this? Is really good. So I got, uh, energetic evil versus the passive evil. Energetic. Um,
Yeah.
well,
I
it's,
think,
I thought about it like this: the energetic, well, it's a threat for Christians because it's actually it's witchcraft trying to get at the good ends apart from the good God. Passive is really more of the threat for Christians because of the small sins that spoil the vine, little foxes that
yeah,
spoil the vine, the tendency to want to, since we know there's a Sabbath, we're always looking for it, but you don't Sabbath on any other day but the Sabbath. You rest after you fight, right? You rest after
yeah,
you fight. And
yeah.
we tend to
And
want to rest
sometimes,
in the fight.
right. Sometimes you rest surrounded by your enemies because God says now's the
Yeah.
time to rest.
Well, that's a good
Um,
Sabbath, right?
but yeah, that's a good Sabbath. But there's always a temptation to um, rest before the fight's done. And then one of the things that I think uh, one of the we see throughout history in paganism, um, when like in Hinduism, the highest uh, priests that were the ones. This is going to sound weird at first, but let me explain. Were hermaphrodites, people that were born with both sets of genitals. They were immediately made into high priests. Um, eh, the
They
but
still do that.
they still do that, yeah, in Hinduism. And in but they also do uh, um, they trans um, people for the same purpose, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
there's a kind of priest there. You never don't have a priesthood. You always end up with a priesthood. In a mechanistic world, though, the priests you end up with priests that priesthoods made of people that are transgressing creational boundaries, because what priests do is they stand across boundaries, right?
Mm.
And so a true priest of God stands between God and people and lifts them across boundaries. The verb used for the act of a priest is to oblate, to lift across a boundary.
Like Moses
Um,
did when he stood on the mountain, he saw heaven, and
yep,
then he could also see earth, and the command was to take heaven and put it on earth, the
right,
tabernacle, right? And those,
exactly, right.
yeah,
So you have this boundary between heaven and earth, the firmament, but Moses stands across it by the power of the Spirit, by the active presence of God, by him drawing Moses up and then sending him back, and all of those things. He ends up oblating the people to God. He ends up carrying, and then the priest actually wears the tribes upon himself when he goes in, because he's carrying the people across. He's oblating the people to God. Well, people, as people made in the image of God, can't not have a priesthood.
mm,
In a mechanistic world, what you end up with is the people that become priests, that are given the priestly duties, are the ones um, that cross the creational boundaries, or attempt to cross creational limitations, to
mm.
deny creational limitations. And so what's happening, and is what's going to happen more and more, is that um, homosexuals and trans folks they're becoming the priestly class in our society, um, because they are crossing, they're denying the creational boundaries, um, and that uh, so we're going to face a religious fervor in when we oppose it, where I think we tend to think that this is some sort of cultural thing, a cultural, but this is actually a return to a magical view of the world. um, and so we need to start looking out for the places that we act like magicians, that we let our priests and pastors and people act like magicians, uh, instead, and get our hearts right before the Lord. Um, and I think it's easy as Protestants to say, "Hey, like the Mass." Like that older view of the Mass where they say magic words and the internal state of it changes. Um, the but
Richard
that's
Dawkins
not
just
going to.
talked about that.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, Richard Dawkins talks about it, but I think this is where he because so that Aristotelian view um, makes it possible for a mechanistic in a mechanistic setting. It makes it possible for a priest to have the magic words that can transform the internal nature of a thing without the external accidents of a thing, as Aristotle put it, shifting and changing. Now we need to resist every place where we act that way, um, and because it's our immune system that's compromised, right? So if a person can just one day say, "Hey, I'm a man," and we have to say, "Oh, they're a man today," and that gives them actually they have some sort of priestly power over their identity, that they can speak over themselves, and that internal nature changes even though the externals don't change at all. And then we're required to help them get the externals into the right shape to go along with the internals. Um, Anything that we do as Christians that is like that, we just need to stop doing it, right? And so, um, somebody doesn't become a Christian because they have declared themselves a Christian. But that they we our words don't have that kind of power over our identity, over our nature, right? We become a Christian by water and the Spirit, right? We are born again by water and the Spirit. We are not born again by our own declaration, because we are not. That's not what our priesthood does. Our priesthood is not over reality. Our priesthood, um, the the individualism that of the modern world is an attempt to have the priesthood of all believers in a mechanistic universe without Christ, right? that that is what we are seeing run rampant right now, is the priesthood of all believers without Christ in a mechanistic world. So I can make a declaration over myself, and my internal nature is changed by it, right? Well, our words don't have that kind of power. That's not and we need to resist that in the place where we're most tempted to, which is waiting around for somebody to declare themselves a Christian,
Does
as if their
evangelicalism
words do that.
does evangelical know does evangelicalism know anything else other than that? That's all we know.
Right,
Evangelicalism only knows credible profession. So then if you make one, then you're in.
right. But I think we, if we're treating that mechanistically, or if we're treating it like it's the words that did it and not stopping, and this is where the thankfulness comes in, right?
Mm.
Um,
It has to be a work of the spirit.
it has to be a work of the Spirit. And this is something that I learned from my Baptist uncle, right? My who he said it. If somebody says, "Well, here's I decided to become a Christian at this point," um, he said, "You as a pastor, you don't do it in front of everybody because that'd be embarrassing, but you do pull them aside and say, though, that the Spirit is what made you a Christian, right?" Like, and just helping people learn to to not treat it like they
It's
made
mechanistic.
themselves a Christian, like it's mechanistic. I'm the one who did this. I'm the one that has authority over me. Now I think historically, within the Reformed tradition, one of the things that's most helpful, I think, is Calvin's understanding of the relationship between regeneration and baptism, that he says is not it's they're not united by time, they're united by the work of the Spirit, right? So that when you say, "When did I become a Christian?" um the that our regeneration is tied covenantally to our baptism. And so we can say, well, I became a Christian at my baptism. And even if you say, and that baptism became an internal reality for me when I was 32, right? That the baptism is still spiritually tied to our regeneration, and the regeneration is spiritually tied to our baptism, because we're told by God it's by water and the Spirit that we become a Christian, right? So it doesn't matter if those two things are at the same time, one's before the other's before the other, right? None of that. We're told that's how we become a Christian, right? That what regeneration is by water and the Spirit. And so even if in time they're separate, that we should say, no, theologically, God's act has tied them together, right? So that because we're not in a ticking clock, we don't have to tie things by moments of time. This isn't a clock that God wound up. This is the active Spirit of God, who's outside of time, working within time. That those two things are tied together. So I became a Christian when at my baptism and at the regeneration of my spirit. Right. And those are both true. So I think that's a helpful, and I don't think this is a Baptist versus Paedo-Baptist issue. It's a magical worldview versus a Holy Spirit-led worldview issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, it does make sense. I just don't. I think you pulled off one layer of the onion that has 90 other to go for that to be able to resonate, because there's so much that we've been through this is why we started doing this, is because when we started doing this, I realized how much of a Gnostic I was. Wasn't trying to be, but that's what I was.
Yeah.
Right. Had Gnosticism all laced inside of my Christianity. And I think it's the same thing with this mechanistic, my cosmology started to change. And I think it's the same thing with this mechanistic understanding of the world, which is why we're going through images with Spencer, images of
Spencer's
life.
Images of Life.
Spencer's Images of Life with C.S. Lewis leading the way, is because we're trying to reshape the cosmology for Christians so that they understand the world, the cosmological understanding biblically, instead of the more secular one with Christianity over the top of it. And I think it takes a lot for people to rework that structure. And I don't know if this going to, we were talking about earlier about theological fights and stuff like that. I think there's a lot more work underneath that needs to be done for people to understand that that's a reality and that's what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, this is like the lifelong process, because it's one thing to realize you're a Gnostic. It's another to realize what a Christian view of the cosmos is. Like,
yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah,
I know. I'm challenged
and
constantly
then
by it.
Yeah, and then it's another to change our habits. Like, because it is hard.
This is
those habits.
This is what's so hard. So I work in the area of politics and thinking about politics all the time. And politics is just Machiavellian, mechanistic cosmology that's functioning all the time. And so when you tell people, listen, you're not going to get out of this through politics, everybody wants to hang you, both sides, because everybody wants power to be able to manipulate reality. And even people who's like, well, the family's away, you got to get married, you got to have kids. They're thinking about it mechanistically. And it's like, you need to be, and this is where Christian humanism comes in. You can't be human without being human. You need to be right. You can't be human without being human. And it sounds like, but you can't. You need to become a human being. You need to become a man. You need to become a woman. You need to live faithfully in marriage together before God. And this is why last week's show was so good too, is because there is, in that covenantal reality, God blesses what flows out of it, right? And then he blesses it. And then you see in Psalms, he blesses it so that when you go to the gates, to fight, make war with your enemies, you won't be put to shame, right?
Right.
Because they're arrows. Your kids are. Well, we don't even know what it is that creates arrows anymore. Like we don't have a real that love, that covenant overlapping reality. Like that's everybody talks about family, but they talk about family for for a structure to have a good society instead of that's what's birthed out of faithfulness and love to God in covenant with God. Otherwise you're cursed, right? You can
Right.
put families together and everybody's like, well, yeah, that's a lesser curse. It's like, who wants a lesser curse? Right? It's like, what were you saying? You want an energetic evil, you want a passive evil. That's all you're arguing for at that point,
Yeah.
right?
Like,
And so,
what if we got something that's not evil?
yeah. Have you ever thought about that? And so there is so much mechanistic cosmology that flows throughout even our conservative politics and conservative thinking because, and I get it, everybody just wants to put it back right, but you don't just get the chance to what did he call it? Magician,
The
metaphysical magician.
metaphysics of magician. Yeah.
Because that's the kind of way where it's like, I just put it back and now everything works right. That's mechanistic, right? That magician gets to say, I just put the cog back in the machine. Now the whole thing works right. It doesn't really work like that. This is long time faithfulness to God reaps a form of blessing, right? Out of relationship with him. And then you become more human. And then over time, God blesses. This is like, well, I think we're in a 25-year battle. And if you keep thinking that you're going to put this thing just with a one piece back and it starts working automatically, right? It doesn't work like that, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
this is why you're going to really like the transgenderism book from David Fowler, because he shows that that on the legal side, that this was a long fought legal loss to get here, right? And so which makes the expectation a long fought legal battle to get out of this legal situation, right? So if there's a whole series of laws that are overturned or passed, legal theories untaught and new ones retaught, that it gives you a way to say, oh, well, okay, let's move that direction then. And I don't have to win everything right away. And I can 3 steps in the right direction is 3 steps in the right direction. Even if you have to take 100, if it's 100 steps away, 3 steps in the right direction leaves people 3 steps closer. So
that's that's funny. We've fought this issue on abortion versus the incrementalists versus the abolitionists, right? And I think some of the abolitionists are waking up to this, but just because people are incremental doesn't mean that they're not going the right direction, right? And I think sanctification.
Go ahead.
Sanctification works that way.
Anyway. Yeah, it really does. But I think that there are incrementalists, though, that the abolitionists have helped wake up too.
Well, I think they've done a great thing where they've like, those guys were horrible. They weren't incrementalists. They were, what was that? They were the passive evil.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And,
they were the passive. They were resting.
And so there were incrementalists that were like, whoa, no, we're just doing the incremental thing. And the abolitionists came along and said, have you actually judged the fruit? Have you been paying attention? Have you judged the fruit? And a lot of incrementalists were like, oh, look at that. We have not been judging the fruit. And that's hugely important. And so,
fell asleep at the water with the nymph.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And it wasn't every incrementalist that
There's
did,
a lot of them.
but a lot of them did, and there was a lot of grifters. That's the other thing that I had no idea about until
that's true.
Until I made friends with a bunch of abolitionists who were like, let me point out that you're like,
they have been so helpful.
They've been I feel like I'm still learning learning the landscape on even the debates, because I'm like, well, of course I'm an abolitionist. I want it abolished.
Right.
And then there are some abolitionists that don't can't celebrate any victory except for the complete abolition, right? When I think there's a lot of legal battles, and if you win one, we should celebrate and then move on to the next one. So, yeah, but sometimes people have been celebrating things that are actually losses as if they're victories too, and I think that's a huge problem that the abolitionists have pointed out, and I'm grateful for.
I think they have. No, that's real. All right, chapter 5, mutability.
Mutability.
That's next week. Man, so then that's a short chapter too. And then it goes on the image of good. Image of good is a long chapter. Ooh, that's a long chapter.
Yeah, because good is so much more substantial than evil.
Mutability. All right, should we just do mutability next week then?
Yeah, let's just do mutability.
Maybe I'll watch Barbie by then.
And yeah, you can tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm still not happy with Ninja Turtles. I think they failed us. Here's the thing about, okay, I'll say this and I'll end. The thing about, there is a covenant that you make with your childhood heroes. A covenant to them, they make to you, you're unified. And when you grow up and you have kids, you're extending that covenant reality. If it changes, you don't have covenant anymore. If they're not the same, if they don't commit to the same realities that you understood, and your kids can't connect to them, so that when they rebirth them, they don't know that they don't connect, they break covenant with you. And I feel like Ninja Turtles broke covenant with me. I feel like and I love that there's realities, there's truths there, there's good things there to glean from it, but they did it without connecting 9-year-old Knox to, my new son who's 9 years old and the 13-year-old. And I feel like they wouldn't even know who these guys are anymore. It's
that they didn't hold to the canon.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not so much concerned about their storytelling. One part of their storytelling I'm concerned about. They were too obsessed with the fly thing, right? Like, oh my goodness, there's mutants. It's like, they're like us. I guess we can hang out with them, kind of. Yeah, that was weird for me. I mean, I guess their morals were so high always that they wouldn't have been fooled. And Bebop and Rocksteady were good guys.
That was the part that part. The conversion of Bebop and Rocksteady, but we're gonna have to see what they do, because Bebop and Rocksteady just like went along with it and we're not active characters, and that did bother me. I also think that there was a weird that part, it felt like they were after a particular kind of thing. Where was it because Splinter's thing was there are no other mutants, we're the only ones. And so then they meet other mutants, and they're like, oh, they must be like us. And it turns out that there's a moral distinction that was never made about the ontological difference that mutants have. But and yeah, I think that was a weakness for sure.
Yeah, I'm not. This is. I feel like the same way I felt when I first watched the first X-Men. Right. At least they got some of the characters better in the first. It was a 2000 X-Men. Right, the very, very first one. Remember when and they changed their uniforms, and Wolverine wasn't wearing his traditional uniform. You're like, what is this all black leather stuff?
Right.
Somebody doesn't like our story. That's how I felt. I felt like a pagan is trying to tell a Christian story, and they don't know this ain't how it went. And I'm like, yo, that's not. No, that's not right. That's not how it goes. And so it just felt like that too.
Just go rewatch the second Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you'll be good.
Yeah, I like the first one too.
Oh yeah, but the second one was was the best one, I thought.
I mean, they had brain in there, a crane in there. I just loved it. It was great.
Yeah,
Yeah. All
it
right.
was. All right.